Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode number 32 of the Son of Man podcast. And today we've got a really good episode for you. It's with a guy named Reyn Sewell, and it's honestly so good. Obviously, here on the Son of Man podcast, what we are all about is Christians achieving their God dreams, ambitions, and everything that God has put on their heart to do. And this one's all about how you can get energy to do that, how you can get better sleep, just have more energy, lose some weight, put on some muscle, and just have more energy to achieve what God has called you to do. We talk about sleep, we talk about exercise, we talk about nutrition. There's a whole lot of good stuff that you're going to learn in this episode that's going to be actionable. There's going to be stuff you can just actionable. Yeah, I guess that's it's super helpful. Honestly, you guys are going to love this episode. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Hey, I'm Paul and welcome to the Son of Man podcast. This is a podcast for ambitious Christians who are working towards their God dreams. For me, God has put it on my heart to end homelessness in New Zealand. So join me on this journey as I talk with experts about how we can learn more about God, dive deeper into our finances, have better relationships, work smarter, set better goals, and live healthier lives so we can achieve our God dreams. If this is something you're interested in, make sure you follow this podcast on whatever platform you're currently listening to this on. And without further ado, let's get right into this week's episode. Reyn Sewell, welcome to the Son of Man podcast. How are you?
Good. What's up, Paul?
Yeah, hey man, it's good to have you on. We've been talking in the intro, and I think what we're focusing on today is using energy and getting fitter and healthier so we can achieve our God dreams. Because the whole purpose of this podcast is for people whose God's put a dream on their heart and going out and achieving it. And so, talking today about health and fitness isn't something we've actually done so far, but I think it's going to be a super key part. Having a mind that can, like a lot of people sell food and stuff that, so your mind can focus better and pay more attention to stuff. And we're going to be talking about maybe nutrition, but also the fitness behind that, living a healthier life. So that's super interesting and super helpful. But without further ado, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you started a coaching business in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I guess my story is somewhat unique. The two biggest passions of my life have always been faith and fitness. Always. I grew up in the church. My family was very actively involved. Like we were the every Sunday family, whether we necessarily wanted to or not. we were there. We were in church. We were worshiping. And I don't know what it is, man. I was a weird kid. Like I used to set up an obstacle course in my backyard, where I vividly remember saying, "Okay, I'm going to run a circle in my backyard." And when I get to this point, I'm going to do push-ups. And then I'm going to do the monkey bars. I'm going to slide down the slide. And then when I get to the sandbox, I'm going to army crawl through it. I don't know, man. That just has always been kind of who I am. And so that carried me through. I was actively involved in the church, but then also in athletics. And I'll fast forward a little bit because I'm sure you don't want to know a full history here.
Nah, you're good. You're good.
But I guess kind of my athletic story kind of it took off, I suppose, in college. Actually, you know what? I think what I'll do first is actually share almost like the faith side of stuff. So again, grew up in church and went to college and got plugged into this church that was amazing for lots of different reasons, and was worshiping one Sunday. I was in school studying to become a physical therapist. That's kind of what I wanted to do. And I was in medical biology major. I was pre-med and was really enjoying it, was doing well as what also. But one day while worshiping in this worship service, I felt God say to me, "Hey, I want you to be a pastor." And I very quickly said, "No, thanks." I have no interest in that whatsoever. And I figured that calling, that feeling would basically go away as quickly as it had appeared. But that wasn't the case, man. It just, it was almost kind of weighing on me every single day. And every single day, I was just trying to shove it off and say, "That can't be right. Like, why me? It can't be me." All the excuses that you see a lot of biblical characters making as well, like Moses and whatever else. I had all my excuses. I had all my reasons why I couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't. So fast forward, that was, I think that was, maybe spring semester of my freshman year. So then summer happened,
Right.
and I went back home. But when I got back to my sophomore year of the fall semester, I started worshiping in that faith community again. And gosh, man, it was that feeling that God had called me to ministry was even heavier. So
Right.
I started talking to my pastor and mentor at the time about what I was experiencing. And it's crazy. During that time, a youth director of mine, who I had not spoken to in a long time, sent me a message, and she said, "Hey, it's been a while, but I hope you're doing well. I'm a part of this team that's creating a retreat, a weekend experience, where you set aside time in order to discern God's call on your life." And I was praying about the retreat, and you specifically came to my mind, so I thought I would invite you specifically. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is what I've been wrestling with now for, at that point, a good half a year maybe.
Right.
So the retreat was in the winter time. So I went to the retreat, and it was awesome. It was a really good experience. But I'll tell you, I didn't get that yes that I guess I was looking for, or maybe needing to actually take that leap of faith and trust God with the trajectory of my life's work, what I was to do. So I get back to spring semester of sophomore year, and it's at this point, it's like really, really weighing on me. I'm continuing to talk about it with my pastor and mentor, and he said, look, if you're looking for a specific answer, why don't you, ask God a specific question, or pray specifically to get that specific answer that you're looking for. I said, okay, I'll give this a try. So from that point forward, I started to pray, God, if you really want me to be a pastor, then I would like somebody to let me know. I don't care who they are. I just want to know that they are a devout Christian. There's somebody that truly has a relational connection with you. So I have maybe some confidence that what they're hearing is right and correct.
Right.
And I don't want them to know me, but I also don't want them to be a complete stranger. So prayed a pretty specific prayer, right?
Right. Yes.
And 2 weeks after praying that prayer a few times, there's this group that came to the church. I don't know if you'd be familiar with this, but it's a group known as YWAM. It stands for Youth on a Mission, I believe, or something to that effect.
I think I've heard of it.
Youth with a Mission.
Yeah.
And it's a group, it's the individuals who are part of YWAM essentially undergo an expedited version of maybe a seminary education. So instead of a 2 to 4 year education in a formal seminary, they do this in 6 months of intensive discipleship training.
Right.
And there was some connection between this YWAM group and the church I was at. So they were coming over to do some work and stuff. And I met all of them that Sunday morning at church service. And then that Sunday night, I was able to get off of work, and they were actually leading a worship service for our faith community. So I went, and we were worshiping, we were singing, and I still remember this like it was yesterday. All of a sudden, I see this girl leave her pew, and it looks like she's walking toward me, and I'm like, maybe, when you gotta go, you gotta go. Maybe she has to use the bathroom or something. I don't know.
Right.
But she continues to walk closer and closer, and then at this point, I'm starting to feel like she's coming at me, right?
Yeah.
And that's what happened. She came right up to me, and she said, "Hey, I feel like I need to tell you something." She said, "I know that you've been struggling right now with what God has called you to do with your life, but He wants you to trust Him 110%, to never look back, to go with what He is calling you to do, and to run with it." And just started to confirm all of this stuff that I had been running from and wrestling with. And so from that point forward, I was like, okay, this has got to be it for me. At this point, I know that I know this is what God has called me to do. So I actually finished out my undergraduate education with a biology degree because, again, I was doing well with it and I loved the material. The human body fascinates me. I think it's one of, I forget how many wonders of the world there is, or there are, but I feel like the human body should be the next one, whatever number that might be, because it's incredible, man.
Right.
It's absolutely incredible. So I finished out my degree in pre-med, but ended up going to seminary afterwards. And then once I finished my seminary education, became a full-time pastor. And I've been serving as a full-time pastor for the past 5 years.
All right.
So that's like the faith side of things.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when
Amazing.
it comes to the fitness side of, oh, thanks, man. It's kind of crazy to look back on it. You know, it's life really, it's been a whirlwind. You know, there's been some challenges, especially most recently with the pandemic.
Right.
Has changed the way that we, you know, function as a church in so many ways. Maybe a little less so now, but yeah, I mean, it's been challenging, but it's been so rewarding, and a lot of fun in lots of ways too. But then when it comes to the fitness side of things, again, from when I was a little kid, I was always super active. Started to dabble in all kinds of sports throughout elementary, middle school, high school. Soccer and cross country were probably my primary things. But what happened is in college, I started to get into this stuff called it's a Warrior Dash race. I don't know if you've heard of Warrior Dash races. It's very similar to Spartan races.
I've heard of a Spartan race.
Okay, or Tough Mudders, maybe.
Yeah, we have, what do we call, like Tough Guy Challenge, which they just run through a whole bunch of mud. Is that the sort of vibe? Or am I
it's really similar.
Okay.
It's basically, it's an endurance race, but you just throw obstacles in there.
Right,
And again, I've always loved obstacles, and so I thought that was really cool. So I started to do that. Actually did really well. I ended up winning a handful, or I think I won 2 or 3, and then I placed second in one, I placed third in another. A few years after kind of doing that, I actually competed in the first ever Warrior Dash World Championship that they had. It was in was right outside of Los Angeles, California, I want to say. And so that was a really great experience. But kind of in between that, one of the things that I wanted to do is, as a kid, I had always watched this show called Ninja Warrior. Have you heard of Ninja Warrior?
Yep.
Yeah, so
Everyone
it started
who's
out
watching TV,
in Japan.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It started out in Japan, and I watched it as a kid, and I said to myself, I'm gonna compete on Ninja Warrior one day. Well, Ninja Warrior eventually came over to the States here, the United States, and American Ninja Warrior was born. And then, again, that dream was kind of in my heart and mind, so I actually applied. I believe it was season 5, I want to say, and I was accepted. So I actually competed on American Ninja Warrior in
Wait, were you on
season
TV?
5. I was. So
I did not know that.
This is always funny to say. So yes, I was on TV, but let me explain. So when I was on TV, if you've seen the show at all, anyone who might be listening or watching, so sometimes after commercial break, they come back and they say, you know, welcome to American Ninja Warrior. Here's what you missed. And then they show a whole bunch of people falling. That was me. I was in a fail montage. So that was a piece of humble pie there. But I was on TV for, you know, half a second, maybe a full second. So that was humbling. But I'll tell you what, man, it was one of the coolest experiences that I've ever done.
Right.
And I actually tried a few years later to get back on the show. I was not selected to compete again. In season 6 here in America is when the show blew up and it became kind of what it is today, which is like the household show.
Yeah.
And basically after season 6, unless you were abandoned as a child in the wilderness and raised by wolves, you just didn't have the story to get on.
Right.
because it is a competition. It's an athletic competition, but it is first and foremost a TV show.
Yeah, right.
And so they're looking for story and stuff
right.
like that. And anyway, so maybe I won't go into the whole experience trying to get on again because that might derail the conversation. But yeah, I've competed on American Ninja Warrior. I love athletics. I've done an Ironman triathlon. That was another kind of challenge that I always wanted to do. So faith and fitness, again, kind of bringing this back together. Faith and fitness have always been huge aspects of my life. They're my passions. They're what I love. And basically, about a year and a half ago, I said, why have I not been blending these two things together? So what I ended up doing is creating basically a fitness program or becoming a fitness coach. And now I help Christians lose weight, get in great shape and generate the energy that they need to power their God-given purpose. Right. And so that is kind of, in addition to the pastoral ministry I do, that is also what I've been doing now. And man, it's been great. So I know I just threw a lot at you, but that's kind of a bit of my story and what I love to do.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. That's probably the best intro to a podcast I've ever seen on my podcast. So great job, amazing, A+.
Thanks, man.
That was really
appreciate.
That was a good story as well. I was hooked. And that intro before we started recording, you mentioned about I sent you some questions. This wasn't on it, so feel free to be like. But you mentioned something about your whole purpose is like honoring God through fitness, and probably some other stuff along those lines. What does that actually mean when you say that?
Yeah. Great question, man. So for me, worship is actually an act of worship. And it's interesting because...
Oh, wait, did you say...
This is not talk...
Sorry, let me just comment. Did you say... I think you said worship is an act of worship.
Working out
Working
is
out,
an act of worship.
Right.
Yeah, maybe I misspoke. Whoops.
Okay. You're good.
Yeah, working out. Okay, so working out is an act of worship.
Right.
And this is not talked about in any sort of church setting that I've ever been a part of. This is like a giant missing piece to most people's faith. So basically, whenever you think of worship, or whenever most Christians think of worship, they don't think of going to a gym and dripping sweat and all this stuff. But to me, that exertion is actually in many ways an act of praise. Right. And when you look at the creation narrative found in Genesis 1 through Genesis 3, basically what we see is that God has commanded us to be caretakers of creation. And we tend to think of creation as the world around us, right? The environment, things like that. But we oftentimes kind of leave ourselves out of that equation. But I mean, we are creation. Right. We're not the creator. And if we're not created, if we're not creation, then I don't know what we are. And so it would just make sense that, we're to care for our physical selves as a part of living into that mandate more fully. And so that's why I think, getting in shape, staying in shape, making fitness just a part of your life is actually a way in which we can worship.
Right.
The way that I like to phrase it is that there is a spirituality to our physicality. That's kind of like the way that I like to say it, because if you think about it, we often tend to separate. Well, we put this dividing wall between the sacred and the secular, right, or the spiritual and the material. But really, I don't know that Scripture actually puts a dividing wall between that. Not nearly to the extent that we in our modern day tend to. For example, if you think about even singing or something like that, you're using your diaphragm, right, you're using your vocal cords, your tongue, your teeth, your lips. You're using your physical self as part of that worship act. Right. And so that's what I mean by there's a spirituality to our physicality. When you're praying, your neurons are still firing in your brain, enabling you to, create thought and all of this stuff. And so there's an intermingling of the two that is often just disconnected. And for that reason, I think that's a big part of why so many people of faith find themselves caught up in this obesity epidemic that we face as a society worldwide.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. Like you're right. It's no one really talks about that in church, but actually being healthy and being fit allows you to do what God's called you to do to a greater degree. I'd assume depends what God's called you to do, but for most people, actually being healthy and fit would be a great asset to doing what God's called you to do. And I remember I like how you said working out is an act of worship, because one of my mates preached a message at church about how workers worship. So probably along the same sorts of things about how the things we do on a day-to-day can actually honor God, and God's actually called us to work. And in your case, working out is probably can be a part of that. So yeah, that's great that you said that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't we talk about energy, because that's going to be the bulk of probably what we talk about today. And so what do you think are some of the most important things we can do to increase our energy so we can do what God's called us to do? That's a very high level question, so you might need to break it down a little bit, but what do you think about that?
Sure. So I think there's a few components, and I will actually start with what is perhaps the most unexpected, and that is that you have to rest.
Right.
You have to rest in order to have energy. Most people they stay up much later than they really need to. And I'm guilty of this myself, but you scroll on social media or you're checking emails and all this stuff, and I mean every night people do that. They do that for probably 30 to 60 minutes, sometimes even more, when they could just be hopping in bed, hitting the pillow, turning out the lights, closing your eyes and going to sleep. And so sleep is a huge factor when it comes to generating energy, without question. So if you're not well rested in terms of getting good sleep, then good luck, right? I mean, you're just not going to be very good throughout the day, or you're going to find yourself having to make up for that deficit in energy by consuming tons of caffeine or energy drinks, coffee, things like that. And it's just not quite as necessary if you're getting adequate rest and sleep. But another major factor in this, of course, is also just what you're consuming throughout the day. If you do tend to consume, now I am not the type where I condemn carbs or anything. I think carbs are perfectly fine to eat. But in lots of cases, if you eat too many carbs, it can cause you to be a bit more just lethargic and sluggish throughout the day. It can tend to lead, especially if you're eating carbs in the form of sugar, it can tend to, you have the high and then you have the crash. So nutritionally, go ahead.
I remember in high school taking a health class and learning there's like complex carbs and simple carbs. That's the thing, right? And then complex carbs are like the slow to digest ones that are good for energy. This is what I learned. You can poke holes in what I've learned. So the complex carbs are the ones that are slow to digest, so maybe like whole grain, like not whole grain bread or something. I don't know if that's the first thing that comes to my head. And then there's like simple carbs, which is stuff like sugar, which gives you a high, then you crash really quick. Is that correct?
Yeah, and so certain carbs are going to be broken down in the body differently. So the way that certain carbs are going to be processed is going to be in some cases more beneficial in terms of you actually generating energy, and some can actually be to your detriment. And so it's just about sugar. Again, I don't villainize sugar. I think it's okay if you eat sugar throughout the day, but there is a limit, right? It's everything in moderation is a pretty good rule when it comes to nutrition and just eating, generally speaking. Everything in moderation, you'll probably be at least in the right direction at that point. There is some specificity in terms of what people need, based upon their current height, their weight, their activity level, their biological sex, things like that. So that all plays a factor into what a specific individual might need. But again, if you're just generally trying to watch how much sugar you're intaking, you should be good. But also, you don't have to swing so far to the other side where you avoid sugar altogether and you just completely cut it out. That is highly restrictive, and the more restrictive a diet tends to be, the less likely it is to be maintained.
Yeah.
And then people enter into this vicious cycle of, loss and gain, and gain. And they go like this, and they're having to constantly buy new clothes, and they're frustrated. And, I talk with people and work with people all the time like that. Part of breaking that cycle is not being so restrictive that you can't even live life, or that your thoughts are constantly consumed with what it is you're going to eat, because that's not healthy either. So that's kind of generally what I'd say when it comes to nutrition. But then when it comes to exercising, this is one of the things that's also critically important, and it almost doesn't make sense, because when you exercise, you are expending energy. You're using it up. You're getting rid of it. And so basically, when you look at exercising on a micro level, in some ways it can actually be energy depleting. But when you zoom out and you look at a macro level, like what does exercising consistently over a period of a few months do for an individual? You actually have a net positive gain in energy. So there's some kind of irony there. But yeah, it's critically important. And maybe I could speak a bit more to exercising specifically. If okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I see a lot of is, I guess I'll share my personal opinion when it comes to exercising and that stuff. Lots of people think that cardio is king or queen when it comes to losing weight, but really it's not. Now, there have been studies that have been done that have shown cardio burns more calories than, let's say, weightlifting in a 30-minute time frame. But at the same time, when it comes to cardio, oftentimes what happens is your body builds up, it adapts to that strain. So what happens is you end up having to just exercise. You have to either run harder or faster and or longer to actually continue burning the same amount of calories. So over time, I mean, your workouts become so huge for you to actually continue to burn the same amount of calories as you did when you first started. But when it comes to weightlifting, that's actually not the case. I'm a huge advocate of weightlifting for guys and for girls. I know that for some reason, lots of ladies tend to kind of be opposed to weightlifting, but it is the way to go for anybody, because you don't have that same effect. Weightlifting increases what's called your basal metabolic rate, and that is the rate at which your body burns calories while you're sitting around doing nothing, while you're sleeping at night. So your muscles, the bigger your muscles are, the more calories you're going to burn
by existing.
Just again while you're resting. By existing. That's the perfect way to say it. And so for everybody who wants to really lose weight, that would actually be my encouragement to them, is to build muscle, build bigger muscles. Again, whether you're a guy or a girl, because that in the end is going to enable you to get results more quickly and with more certainty than just sitting on the treadmill for hours and hours, and just running. So that's something that I would say is a big thing that I would encourage everybody to do. Start some sort of weightlifting.
As you're on that, I got lots of questions, but what if you're working out and say your goal is to lose weight? Like, obviously a lot of people talk about what I've learned when I used to work out, and I'm about to start going to the gym again, don't worry, I'm getting there. I was talking to my girlfriend last night about with FaceTime, I'm like, we should go to the gym. And anyway, what I used to learn was basically, I was trying to put on muscle, I wasn't trying to lose weight, but what I learned was I'd basically do whatever I didn't feel like doing in the gym that day. So for example, some people, that's when it comes to like the reps and the weight I was going to do. So sometimes I get really comfortable doing a lower weight with high reps, and sometimes then I'll get comfortable doing a high weight with low reps. And I would do whatever my body didn't feel like doing, because that's what was going to shock the system, or whatever the words people use these days are. Is that something like when people want to lose weight or put on muscle, do you have any idea of like you don't need to give us a whole workout plan now, but like what the general like practical ways to do that is in a gym?
Yeah, absolutely. I can share, I'll try to share what I think is maybe the most important key parts or components without kind of diving into the deep end here.
Nice.
I guess, Paul, what I'd first like to say is I want to address something that I think gets in the way of people even starting. And that is the excuse that they don't have time.
That's my excuse.
Okay, let's talk about it, man. Let's yeah. So I hear that all the time. It's probably, if it's not the top excuse, it has to be number 2. And I don't even know what number 1 would be. But I hear that all the time, right? Like I don't have time. But when a person says I don't have time, what they're really saying, what they're really communicating is that they just have not yet made it a priority. Because the truth of it is we make time for what we deem important and what we deem beneficial and what we deem valuable. That is every single human being in existence. We just make time for the things that we want to make time for. Even if you're in a tight spot. And what's amazing is, honestly, you don't have to spend hours in the gym in order to completely transform your body. Like you can do 3 to 5 30-minute workouts a week, and as long as you stay consistent over time, you are going to completely transform your physique, your body composition. It's just about maintaining consistency. And I crunched the numbers at one point on this because I was curious to know. And let's say you do 5 30-minute workouts a week. Maybe 3 of which could be weightlifting, 1 could be a cardio session, and then 1 could be some sort of active rest, maybe like stretching, perhaps, I don't know, maybe yoga or something like that. So if you just do 3 to 5, if you do 5 30-minute sessions a week that are well thought out and well planned, and all of that, they have the right components, that's only like 0.25% of your total waking hours. And so when somebody, again, that's not even counting the hours that you're sleeping. That's not a 24-hour day. That's a 16, maybe 18-hour day. So the reality is everybody has time to do like 5 30-minute workouts a day. And let's even include, like the time it takes to get dressed and drive to the gym. Okay, so let's say that's an hour total. Oh, so that's like what, 0.5% of your total waking hours? So, everybody has time to work out, and the benefits that you derive as a result are so far above and beyond any of the minute maybe sacrifices you have to make in the here and now in order to kind of turn around your health and change the trajectory of your health. So that would be my encouragement just before I even start kind of diving into exercise, right?
Yeah,
just
nice.
want to handle that up front.
Yeah, not great.
So what should you do? To me, what I have found so great for me and the people that I coach, the people that I train, is to do like a combination of weightlifting and calisthenics. I think it's also important to add in cardio. I don't think cardio is bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not the best way, to really drastically change the way you look and feel. So weightlifting, it's hard to know exactly where to start with this. I guess my encouragement
it's a big topic.
It is. It is a big topic. But you had mentioned earlier, like how many reps should somebody do? And I guess my recommendation, again, if you're wanting to lose weight, you're going to want to build muscle, because again, building muscle makes you burn more calories while you're just sitting around doing nothing, watching TV, eating a meal, while you're talking on a podcast, or listening to one, whatever it might be. So what science and research has shown is that the best rep range to actually build muscle mass is between 8 and 12 reps. Lifting a certain weight between 8 and 12 reps enables what's called muscular hypertrophy, which is just a fancy word for growth. It enables you to grow the size of your muscles and then increase your basal metabolic rate. So that would be my encouragement. You could do 3 to 5 sets of 8 to 12 reps. And honestly, maybe a certain set of exercises. Like, I always recommend incorporating the back squat in your routine and deadlifting. You definitely want to work legs. You want to work all of your major body muscle, like your major muscle groups, which would be legs, core, chest, and back. You could maybe also throw shoulders and arms in there if you wanted to, but you just want to make sure that you're hitting all the major muscle groups. And then again, doing 3 to 5 sets of a certain exercise for 8 to 12 reps. And if you just keep doing that, I mean, yeah, you're going to get growth and you're going to get results.
Right. I heard, this could be wrong. Now, there's all sorts of information on the internet. I heard those sorts of rep ranges are good for building muscle, but the lower rep ranges with higher weights is good for getting stronger. Is that a thing? Or
right? Yeah. So what's interesting is there's not necessarily a direct correlation between strength and size. So you can get into just because you can lift a certain amount of weight doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the biggest in the gym. You can be stronger without necessarily being bigger, because your muscles can become really efficient. And just like again, I don't want to dive into the deep end when it comes to like, the microbiology of muscle contraction and things like this. How the myosin or all the actin filaments work together and pull each other. But anyway, so basically, when you're lifting lower weight, it will help to increase size to an extent. Anytime you're working out, that's going to happen to a degree. So yeah, if you lift the weight once or 3 times or 5 times, you're still going to put on some size. But again, what the science has shown is that when you stay in that 8 to 12 rep range, for whatever reason, the muscles just adapt best. They tend to grow the most within that range there. Yeah.
Oh, okay, nice. And then with getting bigger muscles, progressive overload is a big thing, right?
Yeah.
So constantly growing, getting bigger weights.
Yep, that's a big. There's lots of ways that you can manipulate progressive overload. Of course, the most common way to do it is just to lift heavier weight, and that makes sense. Right. It's probably one of the most necessary ways. But so when it comes to progressively overloading the amount that you're lifting, I guess what I tend to tell people is if the last 2 to 3 reps of whatever weight you're lifting for a certain rep range starts to feel kind of easy or not so challenging, that's when you might go ahead and bump it up 5 to 10 pounds. Maybe 5 pounds if it's an upper body exercise like the bench press or the lat pull down, something like that. Maybe 10 pounds if it's something like a back squat or a deadlift. But if the last 2 to 3 reps of an exercise aren't too challenging anymore, that's whenever it's a good indication that your muscles are ready to handle more.
What if that's like, I looked up, by the way, for everyone not in America, that's like 2.5 to 4.5 kgs ish. What was I going to say? What if that's like those last 2 to 3 reps start to get easy, but it's just the first set?
Yeah, if it's the first set. Yeah, if it's the first set and it would probably be more accurate, and it'd probably be a more accurate indication if you based it upon, I guess, the middle set or the last set, especially.
Okay.
If it's somewhat easy toward the last set of whatever exercise you're doing, then I mean, you definitely want to go ahead and bump it up. But you're right. In the first set, you're probably going to have a bit more energy, and your muscles aren't going to be as worked and as tired. So probably basing it upon like those mid sets or the later sets would be a better indication of when to bump up the weight.
Nice. Do you think there's anything exercise we missed? Any big picture easy stuff that we missed with exercise?
Let me think. I think that basically covers it. You just want to make sure to hit all the major muscle groups, and if you want to build muscle size, it's best to do certain exercises and lift certain weight between 8 to 12 reps.
And it's still the same if you're trying to lose weight, you still want to build muscle size, right?
Yeah, so you're almost in my eyes, you're almost always wanting to build muscle, unless you have a very specific endurance goal, like I want to run a marathon.
Oh, okay.
If that's the case, then no, you don't necessarily want to go to the gym and try and bulk up or something. At that point, you might consider lifting in that 12 to 20 rep range, or maybe even beyond.
Okay. So that makes sense. With diets, what are like the main things? Not necessarily what diet do you recommend? Because what I was thinking about before, I was talking to a guy called Chad Mansbridge, and he's written a book about reading the Bible and understanding context and everything. And I asked him a question like, okay, cool, what's like the best, what do you think is the best Bible translation or like anything along those lines? And he said, honestly, like whatever's going to get you to read the Bible, like whatever, like it doesn't matter. And so I assume it's the same with diet. Like there's no good diet, but whatever keeps you consistently eating healthy-ish or more healthy than you are now, that's a good diet, right? You don't necessarily need to cut out sugar completely, because then you could do that for a week, but after that you're going to stop that because that's really hard.
Right.
So do you have any general dietary like advice when it comes to increasing muscle or like getting more energy, anything along those lines we've been talking about so far?
Yeah. So I guess I'm not a big fan of diets, just generally speaking.
Yeah, right.
Because at least diets tend to be highly restrictive. For example, and I know lots of people do this, so I'm not really hating on this, but it's just not something that I personally could do.
I couldn't do
keto
it.
Keto, for example, you completely cut out carbs.
Right.
It works for some people for a long term, for just like a lifestyle.
Right.
But I like carbs, and I want to eat carbs. So, that's not a grouping of nutrients that I want to kind of take out of my diet. So for me, the approach that I take and I have my clients take and that I recommend most people take is to count your macros.
Nice.
I don't know if you've heard of counting macros. It's similar to counting calories, but it's just a bit more of a specified way of doing so, and tends to enable people to get better results.
And
but
that's
this
protein,
is where,
fat, and carbs, right? Just to
exactly,
clarify.
Your macronutrients or your macros are protein, fat, and carbs.
Okay.
And kind of like I was saying earlier, based upon your age, your current weight, your activity level, a few different factors, your body needs a certain amount of fats, proteins, and carbs in order to survive. And so when it comes to losing weight, it's just an energy equation. If you are expending more energy in the form of calories than you are intaking, then you're going to lose weight. But if you are intaking more calories than you're expending, you're going to gain weight. And so it really is all about the energy there. And typically speaking, I tend to not be so focused on, you need to eat like these particular types of foods. For most people, if they just get within a healthy weight range, their energy is automatically going to completely shift, especially if they're overweight or they are obese. Just getting within a healthy, body mass index and all of that is going to be a game changer in terms of you waking up feeling energized and ready to take on the day instead of waking up still exhausted. Things like that. So to do that, I just recommend, there's all sorts of apps that people can use that help produce, the amount of macros that they might need to eat throughout a day's time in order to remain in a caloric deficit and actually, lose weight. So I don't know that I would recommend maybe a particular one. but that's the approach that I take, and it's worked wonders.
Right.
The reality is, whether you eat a chicken breast that is organic and cage free, or whether it's some factory farmed one, a 5 ounces of chicken breast is going to have approximately 35 grams of protein, and so it's
Right.
still calorically, the same amount of calories that you're intaking. Or when it comes to carbs, whether you drink a soda or whether you eat some whole wheat pasta, an argument could be made that one is maybe healthier than the other, but even still, you're still consuming. If you eat 40 grams of carbs in the form of whole wheat pasta, and you drink 40 grams of, or you intake 40 grams of carbs in the form of soda, it's still 40 grams of carbs. And so it's still the same amount of calories. And this is where people get maybe confused, but some of the healthy food out there is actually what's keeping people overweight and obese.
True.
Because somebody will go to a restaurant maybe and they'll order a salad, and it'll be, let's say, a grilled chicken salad. But what's also on it is a whole bunch of fatty ranch, right? Some walnuts or some almonds that again are they're healthy for you, but those nuts contain a whole bunch of fat too. And then maybe some cranberries thrown in there, or some croutons. So like that's a ton of carbs, and all this stuff. And ultimately, I mean, that salad has more calories in it than like, let's say, a Big Mac burger. So from Burger King, or going to a McDonald's and getting the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's where you have to be careful. Just because a food is healthy, you can still be unhealthy eating healthy food if you eat too much of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I remember when I first started in my high school, we had to learn a subject, and so I was learning Japanese, and our teacher taught us that sumo wrestlers actually eat really healthily. They eat like rice and chicken and what we'd consider a healthy meal, but they just eat so much of it that that's how they get to the size they are. And so that makes sense with what you're saying. If you eat a lot of healthy food, you're still going to get overweight. With the counting calories and macros, I used to use MyFitnessPal, which is an app. Scan the barcodes of whatever you eat. I don't know if you have a preferred one, but I found that it's really easy. You say what your weight is, how much activity you do during the day, your age, blah, blah, that sort of stuff. Your weight, I don't know if I didn't already say that, and it says, "Oh, cool. Do you want to gain weight or do you want to lose weight?" And it'll give you just how many calories you should eat and how many macros of each thing. And you just scan your food you eat every day, and it's good because like, oh wow, I eat a lot of fat and not a lot of protein. Okay, cool, that's just that. And so I'm not sure how accurate it is, but at least it gives you a baseline of like, okay, cool, I'm eating too much this way, not enough this way, or I'm actually eating a lot of calories or not enough calories, or anything like those lines. So do you
exactly
rate those
right.
sorts of apps?
Yeah,
Okay,
so
good.
the one that I use personally and the one that I have my clients use is an app called Avatar Nutrition. And it's excellent because what it does is, based upon all the factors that I already mentioned, it says, here are your macro targets for each day and for the week. And you stick to those targets, and what it does is it adapts as your body adapts. I don't know if MyFitnessPal even has that sort of adaptability and specificity to it,
to be honest.
but Avatar Nutrition is the app again that I use and I have my clients use, and it is excellent. It's the app that for me has helped me to. Oh, I didn't even go into this when it comes to my story. So I've been in athletics and stuff, right, for I guess the majority of my life. But at one point I sustained a shoulder injury in this shoulder, and it took me out for 8 months, man. 8 months that I wasn't able to exercise at all. And I won't go into all the details, but there were so many factors that really just came together. And I completely stopped caring for my body at that point. So I became borderline obese. And I was in really great shape. I'm competing on Ninja Warrior, that sort of stuff. And then I got fat, And so I stayed that way for probably 2 to 2.5 years, and I was miserable every single day of my life. Like, I hated the way I looked. I felt like crap. I wasn't able to do the ministry that God was calling me to do, at least not nearly as well as as I could have had I been healthy. And yeah, man, eventually got to the point where I said enough is enough. I cannot continue to live like this. And so I pieced together all that I had come to know through, again, just experience, education, my degree in medical biology, but then also my degree in seminary, kind of piecing these together, having the spiritual component mixed with the physical and all of this stuff. And lost right around 40 pounds. And Avatar Nutrition is one of the apps that I used in order to help me in that process.
Right.
It's also the app that I've used to help me get to like 6% body fat at one point. So I highly recommend that app personally.
Yeah, no, I looked it up, and it actually looks really good. I'm going to get it.
Yeah. Go ahead, man. That's great. Absolutely.
So you said it like adjusts based on, so say you've been like, say you're trying to lose weight. Say you start losing weight, then does it automatically adjust? Maybe you need even less calories than you did before, that sort of thing.
Yep, exactly. So if you weigh in one week and you eat a certain amount of macronutrients every day, and at the end of the week you stick to your targets pretty well, but the number on the scale doesn't move, or it even moves in the opposite direction, right? Where you gain a little weight, it automatically adjusts your levels to account for that, so that it puts you back in a deficit, and then it continues to help you progress in that way.
That's so smart. Okay, is it free? I can't really tell.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
No, it's not free, but it's very affordable. It's probably $10 a month, $10 a month, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's worth
especially
it.
And if you think about it, if you're trying to lose weight, meaning that you want to be in a caloric deficit, in a month's time, you're going to be eating $10 less of food, if that makes sense. So the app almost pays for itself. Because you're going to skip eating out that 1 week, and that one meal is probably going to, in and of itself, pay for the app usage for that month. Yeah. So it's a no-brainer in terms of that.
Yeah, I'm usually like paying for another subscription. Like, okay, but then if you think about it, that's like less than a meal a month. Is how much it costs. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's probably actually not that bad. Especially if it's going to give you the energy to do what God's called you to do. It's probably $10 a month. It's probably worth it.
Exactly.
We've talked a lot. Okay, we've talked a lot about growing energy, getting energy, which I've learned a lot. I'm loving this podcast, by the way, already. Why don't we quickly? I assume it's kind of just the opposite, but is there any obvious things that like take away energy, like big level stuff? Obviously, stuff we already talked about. But is there anything else?
Honestly, I think it would be the exact opposite of everything that we said would be energy generating. The things that would be energy draining would be not getting adequate sleep at night.
Right.
Overeating and gorging yourself, and you just feel full. And when you feel full, you don't want to move, right? So that doesn't help. Remaining sedentary, especially lots of jobs in today's time are at a desk. So if you're sitting all day at a desk and you go home and you sit on the couch, I mean, you're not if you're not moving, then you're not going to have much energy, period. So just moving, even if it's something as simple, if you're like, I don't know where to start, just go on a walk, right? I mean, that is something that almost anybody can do. Right. Just go on a walk, do something. That's the main thing. It's do something rather than nothing. Even when you don't feel like it, something is always better than nothing. So, on a day that you just don't feel like going to the gym and doing your 30-minute workout, okay, go to the gym and do one for 10. You still got there and you still did something instead of nothing. And over time, again, when you look at when you zoom out and you look at a macro level, that's going to help. Like, lots of people want expediency in all things, but honestly, when it comes to weight loss, it goes like this, right? There's going to be ups and downs, even if you're doing everything right. And so the thing of it is just remaining consistent, and you will, without question, experience that transformation.
The final question to start to wrap up was probably what you just answered. It was, what's the most important thing to having more energy in the day? And do you think it's just consistent exercise and stuff?
Oh yeah,
Nice.
without question. Consistency is the most critical factor when it comes to losing weight, getting in shape, generating energy, and of course living into your God-given purpose. You have to be consistent if you want to change.
Right.
If you're not, then change is almost impossible.
Right. And saying that you'd recommend a less restrictive diet and a slightly easier workout routine, if that makes you more consistent, that's more important than having a real intense diet and an intense workout routine.
Yeah. Yeah,
Nice.
I mean the best workout routine is the one that you'll actually do consistently. So
Yeah, right.
maybe for somebody that's yoga, maybe for somebody that's Zumba or a group class, or maybe that is going to the gym. For me, if you want to maximize your time and I guess get more dramatic results quickly, that to me is going to be a combination of weightlifting and calisthenics.
Right.
But if that's just not something that you're going to do consistently, then you need to figure out what that is that you will do consistently and just do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to real briefly talk about calisthenics and what that actually is for people who don't know?
Oh yeah, sure. That's true. So calisthenics is essentially just it's exercising by using your body and your body alone. You might have heard referred to as body weight exercises. So an example would be push-ups or pull-ups or sit-ups, planks, things like that, where you're not using weights at all. You're just using your body and gravity. And together that enables you to, get stronger, grow your muscles, get better muscle control, balance, coordination, all of that good stuff.
Is there any different? I know there's some people, I've seen YouTube videos and stuff who swear by it, but is there any difference between that and weightlifting in terms of building muscle?
Well, so when it comes in terms of building muscle,
or whatever you're going to say before,
you're going to
Sorry, go
have.
ahead.
Yeah. No, in terms of building muscle, you're going to eventually reach a plateau when it comes to calisthenics, because again, I mean, you can only do so many push-ups before you just start getting into a rep range that's going to begin to work more on muscular endurance rather than muscular growth and strength.
Right.
So that's why I think it's that combination. Weights really give you more power and more growth, but the calisthenics component of it really gives you more mobility, better functionality, and more muscular control.
Right.
And so that's why that's what I used to train for Ninja Warrior, because it's not like power. You have to be able to move really well, but you also have to be very strong. And so it's kind of that blending. I don't think it's just good for Ninja Warrior competitors. I think it's good for everybody to be strong and be able to move at the same time.
Nice. Yeah, is that I've never done CrossFit or know much about it, but that's basically what they preach, right? In that sort of area.
Yeah, you do see a lot of that. CrossFit does a pretty good job of blending those two approaches to fitness. I will say that. Yeah.
Have you ever had any do you have any thoughts on CrossFit in general? I don't know much about it, but I've seen people doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I've been a part of a CrossFit gym at one point. I think you run into some issues, but this might be more particular to certain gyms where sometimes form is sacrificed at CrossFit gyms, and you've probably seen people making fun of CrossFitters because they're flopping around and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I tend to personally like to have a little more control in some of what I do and some of the calisthenics I do. But CrossFit really is great. I mean, they're taking a lot of the same principles that I've been talking about, where it's weightlifting, calisthenics, cardio, progressive overload, all of these things, and they do a pretty good job of blending and merging all of that to really help a person transform their body and lose weight.
Okay, nice. I think that's really all the main things I had to ask about energy. I've learned a lot, by the way. It's been super interesting. I'm about to download this Avatar Nutrition app myself. So that's cool. Do you want to do some rapid fire questions real quick before we wrap up?
Okay, cool.
Okay. Or it's not always rapid fire, but sometimes I talk about it for 5 minutes, but we'll see. What is your favorite book that you've read? I don't know if you're much of a reader, but do you have a favorite book?
Oh yeah, so I was looking at these questions because you had sent them to me earlier, and
Yeah.
I will tell you right now, Paul, I was struggling with
Oh, you don't
coming
have
up
to
with
have
an
one.
answer with these
You don't have to.
because I've read so many books. I mean, in seminary, basically all I did was read, and
Right.
there's so many authors and brilliant minds that I've come across and been able to that have shaped me in my faith.
Right.
I'll tell you this one book that I think is just so brilliant is a book called Epic of Eden by
Okay.
an author called Sandra Richter. And what that book talks about is that whenever you study scripture, it can often come across as just a bunch of this random collection of stories that are almost kind of disconnected from each other. But when you really zoom out and you look at it, there is an overarching narrative that's
Right.
being told
Right.
from Genesis to Revelation, and she does a brilliant job at really showing and sharing what that narrative is. What is this story? What is the story of God, and then what is our place
Right.
in God's story?
Yeah.
And it's one of the best books that I think.
Yeah, a
I
lot of
have
people are
read.
starting to mention that now. Like when I started as a Christian, well, I got saved
Yeah.
7-ish years ago. No one was really mentioning that, unless I just didn't see it. Maybe they were. But now there's an overarching story behind the Bible. It's not just a collection of books, but there is an overarching story. It's starting to come up a lot now, which is cool. And I actually might need to get that book. It sounds good. I don't know if you're much
I
of
would
a
recommend it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're much of a podcast person, but do you have a favorite podcast that you listen to or anything?
I have to admit, maybe there was a period in my life where I listened to podcasts,
Nice.
but recently I've really not so much. My life right now, man, is kind of nuts. So I'm a full-time pastor. I have this fitness business, this
Right.
fitness coaching business now. I'm married. I have a 3.25-year-old
Sure.
toddler, and then my wife and I just had newborn
Oh,
twins.
my.
And so
Fair.
I don't have much
Fair
time
enough,
right
then.
now. I barely have time to breathe. So not much listening to much of
Nice.
anything as of late. I have to admit
No,
to you.
that's chill. If you could have any mentor, that's not God, any mentor who dead or alive, anyone, who would that be in your life?
Yeah, this is another one, man. Honestly, I have absolutely no clue.
Yeah.
There's so many
Yeah.
there's so many people that I admire for so many different reasons, and I started. Maybe this is just a personality trait, but I started to almost get overwhelmed by the question because I was like,
sure.
"Oh, this person would be amazing."
Yeah, you don't have to.
Oh, but what about this person? Like,
What's a good one?
so
then?
I'm not sure how to.
A lot of people
a good one?
a lot of Americans say George Washington.
Oh,
that comes up a lot. And Abraham Lincoln. You don't have to have one.
Okay,
You don't have to have one.
I could
but
see that. Right,
You can
right.
pass. You can
I might pass on this one, but I might pass on this one, my brother.
No, you're good. Where can listeners learn more about you then? Obviously, we talked about a bunch of great stuff in your fitness business. Wherever you want to send people to, where would you want people to learn more about you?
Yeah, so on Facebook, I guess there's two different ways that you could connect with me. You could either go like or follow my business page, which would be faith-based fitness coaching, and faith-based would have a
Right.
hyphen in between it. But I also created a community that's a bit more engaging, and this is really the one that I would recommend to people is faith-based fitness community.
Right.
And I would encourage people to go to that, join that Facebook group. In that, I talk a lot about the connection between faith and fitness. Lots of tips when it comes to generating energy. The purpose behind fitness and living into your own. All of the stuff that we've covered today, I talk a lot about that. So I think people would get a lot of
Nice.
value from it. And then also I do have a website, It's faithbasedfitness.com. But that also has a hyphen in it, so it'd be faith-based.
We'll leave a link in the description, everything.
Yeah.
So worry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll leave links to all of those three things.
Cool.
Well, Reyn, thank you so much for jumping on, bro. Like, honestly, I learned a lot. I've taken a lot of, I don't know if you know, I've taken a lot of notes. I'm gonna go, obviously I'm gonna listen to the whole thing again when I edit it. But yeah, I think it's great. I think people are gonna learn a lot, and obviously energy and fitness and nutrition, big part of being able to do, might not be what God's called you to do, but it allows you to do what He has called you to do. And so I think it's a big part of the whole thing we're trying to, well, both of us are trying to do, basically. I guess we're kind of on the same sort of mission here behind our brands. So thank you for jumping on. I think it was great. Everyone's going to learn so much from it, and thank you so much.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and thanks for having me on, and it was great connecting with you.
Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks so much for checking out this week's episode of the Son of Man podcast. I hope it brought you as much value as it did to me. And if you did enjoy it, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this. It really helped more ambitious Christians just like yourself all around the world get some of this knowledge that we discussed today. Also, if you'd like to dive deeper into any of the topics we discussed today, I've actually got a free private Facebook group that is filled with people just like yourself, people who are trying to achieve their God dreams, that you can head over. The link will be in the show notes or in the description below, and go check that out. Anyway, guys, hope you have a great day, and I'll be back here next time, same place, next week, and I'll see you guys there. Peace out.